All right. We're rocking and rolling through this, G. All right.
All right. Welcome to Keep It PG, where you're here with P and G, and we are going to talk about some hard-hitting facts. June, as you may or may not know, is the month dedicated to mental health, and we have some statistics and some research to discuss with you today. But before we get into it, I just want to touch base with you, P, and see how you're doing. How has your week been?
It's been good. It's been eventful. I was in Vernon for the week. So I don't get to see Vernon other than once a year, and that's for the largest Okanagan artisan show. So Bullets and Beads was out there, and thank you, Okanagan.
What was like one of your favorite things out there that you saw?
You know what? They handpick and jury their artisans, and there was a gentleman there that actually carves out the innards of trees into sculptures and then puts lights on them. They were beautiful. I'm hoping he's there next year.
Not too much is going on this end. I mean, we've got a lot going on this month. Calgary Stampede is going to be huge and exciting, as it always is. Last year I had a great time, so heading back this year. And, it's my birthday month, so I get to, have an excuse to eat cake all day, every day. So I can't complain with that.
Because we need an excuse for that.
Just in case. Just in case. Not usually, but the calories don't count during your birthday month. So.
That's true. The whole month.
The whole month.
Yeah, good for you.
All right, but like we said in the beginning, we've got a pretty big episode with it being Mental Health Awareness Month for the month of June. We've got to touch on men's mental health specifically, because we will talk about some women's mental health and of course job-related mental health as well, coming from your background with RCMP, my background with the Canadian Armed Forces. But, I think there's a lot to be said specifically about men's mental health as well. And I believe you had some statistics ready. So what do you got?
You know what I do? And before we, get started on the podcast and, touching the subject, we've both been touched by this. I don't think there's any Canadian who can honestly say that they have not been touched by mental health or suicide or this subject. But the stats are staggering when you start really looking at them. And they say that in Canada, nearly 75% of people who die by suicide are men. And I don't think that anybody realizes how large that stat actually is. And to just think about that, for a second, like 75% are men, and I don't know whether, and I know some people are going to be sitting there saying, well, that's because the larger the population are men. And that's just a horrible way of even like thinking about it or looking at it. But I mean, 75% being the male population. And if you put it in another way, like 3 out of every 4 suicide deaths would then be men. Men are also about 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women. And if you just look at the numbers alone for Canadians, every year, 4,500 Canadians die by suicide. 4,500, right? That's 12 Canadians every single day. Like just breaking it down into those numbers, like 4,500 every year and 12 every day. Right? There's no reason why, those numbers should be so high as far as I'm concerned. There's no reason why those 12 people every day couldn't have been reached or at least spoken to or at least been looked out for, contacted, had someone to talk to. And I don't think, we're, in the context of our podcast, I think people now need to start breaking it down a little more, right? Men are the most at risk. And when you think about it this way, these are the men that show up every day. They do their jobs. They're making people laugh. They're carrying the burdens. They're showing up at home. They're cutting birthday cakes. They're having dinners every night, and nobody sees what they're going through. And I think this is where, we need to start raising a little more awareness. Now, I think it also needs to be spoken about why that awareness isn't there. And are they just not comfortable coming forward, or are they just not being heard?
I think it's definitely a mixture of all that. We've continued to see a subtle rise in resources that are available for when it comes to someone seeking help with their invisible wounds, the struggles that we don't see, the struggles that, they put a mask over top of consistently because fear of letting someone down or, not being seen as manly enough. The age in which we grew up, it was so taboo for a man to show any sort of emotion, tears, sensitivity, anything like that. They were told that they had to be stoic and they had to be strong and suck it up and there's nothing wrong with you. And when you pile that on top of, and you pass that down, and you've got like generational trauma and just piling on, it makes it very difficult for someone to be able to come forward and say, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, I'm not okay. I mean, even as a female coming from a male dominated employment, even as a female, I felt it was difficult to do that, because with it being a male dominant force, there was still that air to it, where it was like, you suck it up, do what you're told, carry on. No one cares about your problems. Yep. And that's such a dangerous narrative to push on people, because I'm not saying you have to swing the pendulum completely the other way. No, I'm not saying that, but having the space to be able to talk freely about something that's going on in your life without fear of it impacting your job negatively, you being seen, as weak, all those things that typically hinder somebody from saying something's wrong in the first place. There needs to be a little bit more acceptance with that. I see a lot of acceptance, but not actual acceptance, if that makes sense.
Okay. You're talking to somebody who is no longer employed because of their injuries, right? I completely get it. I mean, you bust your ass, you get to where you want to be, or you're well on your way to where you want to be. And the minute that you say those words of PTSD, everything becomes about that PTSD. Something can't go the wrong way, whether it is a bad day at work, a file going astray, it all becomes about that PTSD. But, is it the lower ranks that then need to change? Because I feel like the younger guys are doing a pretty good job of saying, okay, this isn't okay. But our higher ups haven't quite got that, because you know what? They're still the older generation of the suck it ups and the man ups. And you know what? So now you have guys and gals who have a pretty tough job. They're dealing with the bullshit that they deal with every day. They have management and higher ups that don't quite understand that, you know what, the days of suck it up and man up are gone. You can suck it up and man up to some degree. And you don't want, the guys and the timeouts and the whinies every day. But you have to deal with those legitimate calls and the legitimate things that you see. And you have to accept the fact that, you know what, people do need to take care of their mental health, and it needs to be dealt with effectively, because it is a compound effect, right? It is a compound effect. It's not just a one-off. It is a compound effect that's going to affect people long-term, which is going to affect the organization and the people that they work for, whether it is the military, the police, fire, ambulance, whomever, is going to affect them. And I think that is a massive failure. It doesn't matter who you work for, and it's not being dealt with. You can teach these young guys all you like, but unless it's organizationally taught and accepted, because we do talk real good. Like, it is a great talk, but it's not followed through. And we're still canning and not dealing with those invisible wounds the way that they should be dealt with. And we're getting rid of and retiring, medically discharging people who are not well. And it's okay for the organizations to go ahead and do that. But now you're sending out people who are not broken, as they will put it, or unwell, into the world and into their family lives, and expecting them to cope when they don't have the ability to cope. So whose responsibility does that become now?
Relevant to your side of things with the RCMP, what kind of stats do you have for that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the RCMP is a whole different breed. Researchers have found that approximately half of the RCMP members screen positive for at least one mental health disorder during their careers. A career will span anywhere from 20 to 30 years on average. Okay, studies have also found that RCMP members report significantly higher rates of suicidal thoughts than the general Canadian population. Okay, I mean, and you can attribute that to everything that we see on a regular basis, everything we have to deal with and do, right? One study found that more than 1 in 4 serving RCMP members reported having seriously considered suicide at some point in their lives. Okay, recent research has also shown that RCMP members are more than 3 times more likely than the general population have contemplated suicide the year that they were interviewed and spoken to. In that previous year, they've thought about taking their life. So now you have working RCMP members who've thought about committing suicide within that year that they are actually working. That's a scary thought. So they also say that, the average first responder police officer, by the time they have 20 years service, have seen 400 traumatic incidents. General population, 2.
So that's in how many years of service?
20 years of service.
20 years of service, 400 traumatic instances.
Yeah. So if that's what you're taking in and you're not getting help for that, and most of that will be out of fear that you're not going to get the promotion, fear that health services or your organization is going to find out, fear that you're going to get sidelined or your job will be taken away, fear that you're going to have to go off on medical, which impacts all of the above. Where is all that trauma going?
I mean, a lot of times we see it as a ripple effect. And if they're taken out of the workplace, then the next area we're going to see it affect or there be struggle or conflict is going to be with relationships close to loved ones, pretty much whoever is outside of the work circle in their personal circle. When we talk about the stressors for suicide and suicidal ideation, stressors being, of course, a psychiatric diagnosis, whether it's an addiction, depression disorder, or PTSD, CPTSD, or we've got workspace problems, we've got financial issues, we've got relationship problems, legal or disciplinary problems, and then, of course, prior suicide ideations. So it just becomes a complete ripple effect and it goes all the way down because there's kind of like, it's a little bit of a limbo, right? Like the person who's struggling won't necessarily see how it's affecting the people around them. They feel it's such a personal, deep personal issue that no one else can help them. They're the only ones who can solve it. And then oftentimes that's where we end up in the awful, awful, awful reality where someone has passed away by suicide. The thing is, it's not that. It affects everybody around them, especially those who love and care for them the most. It's so awful to see. And the thing that I think some people forget, like we're talking about statistics about RCMP, and we'll talk about statistics for the CAF too before we go into this research report I pulled up. Not just these 2 trades, but firefighting, paramedic, any frontline thing. They're all cross-related. We've got people who retire from the CAF who then go RCMP. We've got people from RCMP who retire and then decide they either go CAF or maybe they go firefighting. Firefighters who go RCMP. Like it crisscrosses. And then if you have one person, like if you've got an RCMP member experiencing 400 traumatic events in 20 years of service, we'll cut that in half and say that they're RCMP for 10 years. We're looking at 200 traumatic events. And then let's say they say, you know what, I need a change. I want to join the military, right? It's not like they just start over with a blank slate and they don't bring any of that previous trauma into their new job and vice versa, right? We're just trading one establishment for another, and none of which, though they are working on it, have fully solved the problem. They haven't, because the numbers reflect that. Like in the report itself that I have, the number of suicides in the CAF is the same as last year and has increased from the year before that. So it's still an issue, and it's just trading one establishment's problems for another establishment's problems.
The mental health issues, they haven't been dealt with, right? And I don't care if you turn around and say, I've had a glorious career and I'm okay. There's always something there. There's always something there. You can't last 30, 35 years in a police organization and tell me that you are completely and totally fine and anything that you have seen along the way has not affected you in some way, right? Like, I mean, I joined when I was 21. Prior to being 21, there was nothing traumatic that occurred in my life. I had never seen a dead body. I had never been to a car accident with a deceased person. You had not, no child sexual abuse, in my life. I had not known anybody that had been through this. Just going through these incidents continuously for 29, 30 years. There are things that affect you and they stay with you. So I find it very hard to believe that anybody, with 30 years and then are going to just jump ship and go to another department. Yeah, it's great you're getting an experienced person, but they're bringing with them everything that they've seen. And it's no different than all our military officers that we get jumping, quitting and then coming over and joining the RCMP and another police force. As a police officer, I've seen it because you can recognize it when they start working with you, that they are bringing their trauma with you. So we do see it, right? But the skill sets that they bring are highly valued. So it offsets sometimes for management in the organization. The trauma is sometimes just kind of pushed aside and, well, that's just how he or she is, versus, well, hey, like, listen, we're getting somebody who's a sharpshooter, and you know what, they're going to be great for ERT, and we got someone who's got this mindset, and you can't find that in the general public that is applying, and the rest of it's just kind of pushed aside. And I think we need to do a better job of, okay, that's not just the way they are. Somebody needs to take a look at them and really seriously sit them down and say, are you okay? And we're here for you. I can tell you that in 29 years of my service, just shy of 30, I think I had one debriefing in my whole entire career.
Aren't debriefings regular after certain traumatic incidences that you guys go through, that you have to sit down with somebody?
They are supposed to be. So one proper debriefing with a psychologist that was actually brought in. So in almost 30 years, one actual proper debriefing.
Are they able to ask for any debriefing, or is it something that it only happens if higher passes it down and decides it's going to happen?
Sometimes they are asked for. Sometimes they will happen. Sometimes they won't happen. Sometimes the members just will want to talk it out amongst themselves. They may happen a lot more now. They didn't when I started. When I first started, it was a lot more of a, she's had a rough day. Take her out, get her hammered, but make sure she shows up tomorrow. That was your debrief. It was more of a just suck it up. She's just going to need somebody to like kind of watch her tonight. Well, watching another teammate was go out, get her hammered, have a good time, get her mind off of this, make sure she's okay, but make sure she shows up tomorrow.
Yeah, the acceptance of alcohol for the purpose of coping in high stress fields of employment is insane.
Yeah,
it's like more time defending if you choose not to drink versus choosing to drink, because it's just, what do you mean? What do you mean? It's been a hard day. You don't want to have a beer? You don't want to grab a drink? Like, it's just, it's become so normalized. And then we wonder why 41% of the 53% of psychiatric stressors is addictions.
Yeah.
Because we're constantly looking for some sort of coping mechanism just to take our mind off of it, because we're not talking about it.
And that carries through with you, right? And you don't really realize it. But when you're 21 and you start, and you weren't a huge drinker, at 21, I mean, but then this is the culture, and this is how everyone is dealing. Yeah, this is the way that everybody's dealing with things. That stays with you as you're kind of going through, right? I heard a couple things. It was like, go grab a drink, get over whatever it is that you're getting over. And I also heard, you're not planning on getting pregnant, are you? Because you're not going to get promoted, or you're not going to get that plainclothes job if you plan on getting pregnant. Those were the two things that I heard in the first 6 years of my career. It was always just go deal with this via alcohol, and you're not going to get pregnant, are you? Right? Those things, I realize it now, how much those two things stuck with me, and mentally stuck with me as well. I mean, if you look at me now, I rarely drink. It is one of those things that I will go out and I will socialize, but I hardly drink while I'm out. Right? And B, I never had any kids. It was you make a choice now. Those two things stuck with me. So I can just imagine being in, what some of these guys have to go through. Like, if they are very minded, or very, I want to be a canine handler, or I want to be, driven in some other way, and what it is that they mentally are thinking that they have to go through, and then coming home where they can't talk to their other half about it. Think about who it is that you're marrying. I mean, I don't know who the military marries. I'd imagine you marry another military, because that's all you're around all the time. Well, police have a habit of marrying other police. Men usually marry nurses or school teachers or another cop. Female members are not usually that lucky. We don't end up with nurses. It's usually another police officer or someone completely outside of the field. but they don't understand what it is that you're going through. So you gravitate towards somebody who does realize and understand what it is that you're going through, but the sympathy isn't really there because you think that you're going to get it because you're dating a counterpart, but they don't talk. They don't talk about what it is that they do. They're not ones to open up because they've been told to suck it up. And now you're living with somebody who sucks it up. So now therefore you're sucking it up and not really saying anything. So now you have two people who aren't talking about how they feel and what's going on. That's a recipe for disaster.
And it plays in a lot of different ways too. I mean, one of the things that sticks out specifically is when it comes to the other half, the one who's in this work having to say like leave. My mom spoke about this before. When dad would have to go away for training or deployment, it'd be like leading up to it, because you know that they're leaving. You just start kind of like bickering and having tiffs and then fights, because it makes it so much easier just to say, get the F out of the house. I don't want to see you right now. And it makes that goodbye that would initially have been really, really sad feel less sad, because you've built that guard to be like, screw you, I don't want to see you anyways. And then they're gone, and then you can like relax. You have time to miss them and everything like that. But like struggles that are occurring in workplace, where you're seeing, as you said, astronomical amount of traumatic events in work. It comes home, you can't talk about it. You feel like you can't talk at work about it. You feel like you can't talk at home about it, but you still have to go back to work. And then it ripples down. Now you're fighting with your partner, the one person that you want to be able to open up to, but for some reason, because you're worried about feeling judged, they're not going to understand. How do you explain seeing what you see to somebody who cannot comprehend what it is that you saw, right? Which explains why you tend to like date in the field, marry in the field, and everything like that. It's so sad to see. And it's so sad to see that it's taken so long, because only recently I've seen mental health resources for the families too. Because everyone needs help. Everyone needs assistance in dealing with this. It's because, like I said before, even though when it comes to someone dying by suicide and only one person is technically dead, it affects everybody. And the people that are left behind are left with questions of, what could I have done differently? What did I miss? Did I not see the signs? Should I have pushed harder? Well, I don't know, because then they would have just pulled away more. They don't have the tools to deal with it. Mm-hmm. The person doesn't have the trust in their partner or in their chain of command to be able to open up about these things, because they have been conditioned to believe that they cannot. Mm-hmm. Because jeopardize work, jeopardize relationship, jeopardize their reputation, what they've been building up to how they want to be portrayed or have people see them as, everything will be jeopardized. And they've been conditioned. We have been conditioned to believe that.
Gee, I think there is some truth to it. I don't know what it's like in the armed forces, but you know, you can only go see a psychologist so many times before the RCMP starts knocking and saying, why is this person see a psychologist, and is this person suitable to go to work? You know what? And every member knows that. So there is that legitimate fear of, well, if I go and see a shrink so many times, they are, the RCMP is going to start knocking. They're going to start asking, and word is going to get back to them, because they are RCMP approved psychologists. And I have to go see an RCMP approved psychologist. Therefore, they're paying the bill. Therefore, they have a loyalty to the RCMP, unless you want to pay out of pocket and not tell the force about it at all. So there's some truth about it. There is some truth to it. So I don't blame members for being hesitant to go and get assistance. I mean, if they would make things so that you could go and get assistance, it wasn't tied to health services unless you were going to get put off work or you were a danger to yourself, and the psychologist thought that you needed to be off, or B, you were a danger to yourself. Other than that, let them go and speak freely, right? Unless they could not work, let them go and speak freely and let them deal with whatever it is that they need to deal with, right? Because let's face it, members are going to need to discuss stuff that they see and stuff that they've had to do and stuff that is bothering them. It's the nature of the job. But at what point should health services need to know about that? And I think that's the fine line. Unless it affects your ability to work, is it any of their business?
Like in the CAF, we have SIF map. So it is a number that we can call anytime, and we just answer a few questions, and then they essentially set us up with a psychologist or counselor or therapist. Like most of the time it's like counselors, and for an abundance of different reasons we can say that, and we'll get, I think it's up to 8 or 12 sessions completely covered, and
Okay.
it just doesn't go back to our chain of command. No one has to know that we're doing it. It's very private in that way. The downside is a lot of times, let's say it's 8 to 12 sessions and you do one a week. That's only 2 to 3 months of counseling, and people need a lot more than that. And so you find that the workaround is calling in and being like, well, this time I'm calling in for depression. This time I'm calling in for anger issues. But the thing is, you're not getting the same counselor every time. So then in order to keep the therapy going in that sense, you have to do the intro all over again, which can be mentally draining, exhausting, and just push you down a hole deeper. And then you try and get back out of it. And then your sessions are done and you have to start all over again. They also have things on there like couples counseling, and you can do counseling for kids as well. So it is beneficial in that way. It's very disheartening to hear that there isn't something like that for the RCMP, unless it's possible that we're missing it. Maybe someone else can
Let us know.
chime in with what it is. But as far as we know right now, there isn't something like that. And it sounds like your two options are use the therapy that's available, but your chain of command will know about it, or pay out of pocket.
Mm-hmm. And keep it a secret, which, you know what, and it is a shame. So, you know, and I hope there is something else out there that I am missing and don't know about right now, right? In which case, you know what, let us know, because that I would love to pass that on to other members if there is something like that. But as far as the CF, you know, your Canadian Armed Forces go, I mean, your stats are staggering as well, right? I mean, they're not any better than ours.
Oh no, they're not good at all. Let's hear them.
You know, I mean, from what briefly I could dig up, I mean, the Canadian Armed Forces stats, they were saying, and I'm not wearing my glasses, so 1 in 6 regular armed forces members, that's 16%, reported symptoms consistent with at least one mental health disorder in a single year. And that's from Stats Canada. PTSD affected 5.3% of regular armed forces members in a 12-month period, while depression affected 8%. Lifetime PTSD among your armed forces members was 11%. You know, mental health challenges were significantly higher among members who were deployed in support of Afghanistan missions than those that were non-deployed members. That does not surprise me, considering what, you know, is going to be seen and done overseas. Long-term follow-up studies showed that the percentage of CAF members and veterans reporting a mental health disorder increased from 11.3% in 2002 to 27.6% in 2018. That's a massive jump. And if I had to take a guess, I would say that is even higher. That was the last one was 2018 that we could pull up. Now fast forward another 8 years.
What's so ironic about that is during those years, I can speak to 2008 onward, we've seen the attempts, we've seen the increase, we've seen the move to accept, hey, we need to talk about it. This is a problem. This isn't something that has to be taboo anymore. This is something that we should be able to discuss. We've seen that increase. We've seen members who have retired, whether it be a medical retirement or a voluntarily release, who've gone on to be entrepreneurs and create their own businesses and also promote and advocate for mental health. So we've seen this increase. And that's what's so ironic to me, that we've also seen those statistics and numbers increase, because you'd think with the more help that's available, there should be a decrease, because again, people should feel safe. There should be adequate help and support. But only recently have they started including families. And I have a feeling that the family aspect and addictions aspect does play a part in that. That's my personal opinion. And again, it also kind of leans to what I said before about it being accepted, but not accepted.
Yeah.
From members higher up in the chain of command who are being told to accept it versus accepting it. It's hard. It's hard because you expect numbers to be better. You'd expect them to be better.
You know what, you would. And I know that PTSD, I think in the Veterans Affairs stats, I think I had read that PTSD was the number one, like the largest claim that they were getting was for PTSD, right? For armed forces members. That doesn't shock me, right? Given what is seen and done and the fact that everybody, is deployed overseas and then comes back and, and I guess this is a question now, is there actually protocol or a policy with the armed forces for PTSD?
God.
Or is it okay, I'm not well and I just don't feel well. Like when you're going through training, like for us going through, and I don't know, and again, I'm going to throw this out to anybody who is like a new recruit or somebody who just came through depot. When I went through, I know that we would get there was like this, I don't know, an hour long, if memory serves me right, where any family member that was there with you at graduation would get sat down and the family would get your child is not going to be the same. Like, so take a good look at your child. They're going to change. Their personality is going to change. Their emotionally may change. Like, they're going to see things. But they never really just came out and said, like, listen, PTSD exists. Your child may have nightmares. This might happen. Da 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 da. It was just an hour long of be patient with your child. Like your child may change. Your spouse may change. Like it was just this little go around. And I remember my dad being there, and my dad's ex-military. My dad being there and just kind of giggling. And I was looking at my dad and I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, 90% of these people in this room don't have a clue of what these guys are talking about. Like your child's going to change. Like, oh, your child may be irritable some days. Just be patient with them. They may have had a long, rough night. And that was the talk. And we're all in a room kind of doing the old, oh, okay. Like some people got it, they were parents that were already police officers, you had some military parents in there and they were kind of like, okay, just say it. Like your kid's going to be like shoving fingers in bodies to, and bullet wounds until ambulances show up and they're going to like deal with this and that. And just like, don't sugarcoat this, right? For the parents that are here. Never did. That was the talk. That was a 1 hour long talk where people were just kind of like, okay, your kid's going to change. That was it. So I'm curious to know if they actually now do this is PTSD, this is how it's defined, this is why it happens, these are the symptoms, this is what we'll do for you. If I had to wagered, I'm going to say a pension check because I'm a pensioner, I would say that the RCMP is still not doing that. Does the CAF do it?
So I think the closest thing that would come to that would be our M2MR, the Road to Mental Readiness, which is presented during basic training. And it goes into, it does actually kind of dive into that. And I believe it was implemented as part of, as response to part of the suicide and mortality reports that get released annually for the purpose of suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. And it does help explain symptoms. It has a scale from like green to red. It talks about it a bit. It talks about resources that are available. But in the same way that I would say you described yours, it's slightly sugar coated in my opinion. And sometimes like I understand completely about not wanting to throw a label on it because because one, it makes people biased because now that's all they're thinking about. They're just jumping immediately to that instead of thinking like, okay, but it could be this. They could have just had like a hard day, and it wouldn't be fair to like label that person, be like, oh my God, you have this. One, we're not trained to do that, and so it's important that we don't jump to labels. And so knowing the signs and symptoms is good, but you can do that without having to sugarcoat it. And
absolutely.
I understand that maybe from the approach of like you're talking to parents and you don't want them to automatically be like, that's it, you're out, Absolutely not, because fear. No one wants to think of the idea of their child seeing and witnessing and dealing with those things ever. I don't know if I would have done that presentation with parents privy, but an unsugar-coated version needs to be given where it can be. Yeah, I mean, so going over these stats, and like I said, when we were talking about R2MR, that actually leads us really nicely into our next part here, which is the 2025 suicide mortality in the Canadian Armed Forces report. Now, this report, even though it's the 2025 one, it touches on 2024 and before. And when I was doing a lot of these talks, when I was doing all my like Mrs. Canada Universe stuff and public speaking, I used these reports to be able to better explain and further amplify what it is that we were advocating for, which is mental health awareness and resources for military veterans and their families. Because like we have said multiple times, it affects everybody. The key takeaway from the 2025 report is that it's an annual report and its intent is to show the effectiveness of suicide prevention efforts. So ideally, every year when this report comes out, they then work on, for example, we have the DOAD 5017-1, which we'll talk about in another episode, which is the suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention for that year. Ideally, if you see a good enough plan in place, that the suicide mortality report that then comes out later, you would want to see an improvement on, because it would show then that the resources, the workshops, the people, the things that they put in place for this has had a positive impact, has helped in some way. That's not always the case, because the immediate stats for this report, which shows 2024 and before, show that in 2024 we had 21 soldiers die by suicide. That's regular and primary reserves. Now, that's the only mention it has for the reserves in that article. I think a lot of times these numbers are actually inaccurate due to not having proper numbers for the reserves, whether they're working Class B full-time or just part-time. We don't have all the information for them, and I think that number would actually be higher if we did. But as far as what they have, that's what they have. So 4 members were reservists, 17 members were regular force. That breaks down to 6 were from Army. Their element was Army, 1 Air Force, 1 Navy, and 9 other. Other include Military Personnel Command, Canadian Special Forces Command, and Vice Chief of Defense Staff, of which 7 were Military Personnel Command, 1 was Soft Command, and 1 was Vice Chief of Defense Staff. The crazy thing is that number from 2022 for the other has actually doubled, because in 2022 it was reported that only 4 from the category other had unfortunately died by suicide, and in 2024 that number was now 9. And so we've seen in those those years, 2022, 2023, 2024, we've seen the numbers for the elements of Army, Navy, Air Force stay relatively the same, but the number for the other actually double. The thing that, relates back to the very beginning when we started this conversation, the thing that sticks out the most is that all 21 of those souls were male.
Oh.
They were all male. And these numbers were similar to 2023, where when it comes to the Reg Force, we had 17 in 2024, 17 in 2023, which was higher because in 2022, it was for the regular force 13.
Okay.
So in the following year, we saw that increase by 5. In the following year, we saw the exact same number. And since 1995, suicide rates have shown an annual increase of 1.3%, largely driven by that elevation that happened in 2011, which was the worst for the element for Army. It's not just all of a sudden somebody just is gone. there's stressors that lead up to this.
Mhm.
So, when I was saying before, 53% is a big stressor is psychiatric diagnosis, which gets broken down into 41% being about addictions, 29% being depressive disorders, 24% being trauma or stress related. The rest of them are like their secondary stressors. So 59% being workplace problems, 24% financial problems, 41% relationship problems, 24 legal disciplinary, and 47 prior suicidal ideations. Of those secondary ones, 35% were in the process of releasing from the CAF. In 2024, of the members who died by suicide, 82% of them had one or more stressor, meaning maybe addictions, financial problems, workspace problems, depressive disorder. 82% of them had more than one, and 35% of them were in the process of releasing from the CAF.
Okay, that opens up questions all on its own right there. Okay, so is the CAF very much like us, where I always call it brainwashing, where you go in, you spend 6 months away from home, away from your family, away from any loved one. You're stuck in a dorm. You're in the middle of Saskatchewan. Sorry, anybody from Saskatchewan, but you are stuck into a new environment, onto a squad or a team that now become your family, and you are advised of that every waking day, hour and day. So this is now your new family, and the RCMP is your family, and they shove that in your head every waking hour of how you are a family. And you are so lucky to be here because you know how many people applied. It's kind of like the devil wears Prada there, like there's a million girls who'd love this job, and you leave there thinking that you are the cat's ass. You are so fortunate that, you've just been through hell for 6 months. And in your head, this family is going to treat you like a family. And then when something happens and you need that family is nowhere there for you. And when you are leaving, it's almost like ties are severed. Like you literally just get an email that says, "Thank you for your service to Canada," and you're gone. And you're left standing there because for the 6 months in training and your entire career, most people, and I would say 90 some odd percent, this is all that they have been. They've started introductions when somebody has said, "Can you tell us about yourself?" or "Who are you?" with their rank and then their name. It's always been constable, corporal, sergeant, staff sergeant, whatever, and then their name, because their whole entire identity has been wrapped around what they did for a living, which was being a police officer. But now they're not that anymore, and they don't know what to do because A, they went in so young that they don't have plan B. B, nobody taught them how to leave. There was no converting over to civilian life.
Well, so we have the transition network that's set up. And again, I think that was another thing that was set up in relation to all these reports and, the prevention postvention in order to help members transition out of the forces. And like anything, you're going to have people who praise it and people who don't. I think that there are a lot of great benefits from the Transition Network Center and the team that they have in place. But I also know that there are other people who have significantly struggled. I know that there are members who, got out in the 2010s who didn't have that type of help. And it was a complete sever of ties. You didn't want to stay with us. You couldn't buck up and, carry on. You're gone. And these are men and women that literally came back from overseas, tried their best, couldn't for the sake of avoiding this type of outcome, and then were then essentially left to feel ostracized. I think the age that you mentioned, joining so young and everything. I mean, like I grew up with it my whole entire life, and then officially joined at 17. I signed my paperwork and everything around 17, and then 18. I'm in training and everything. Like I don't even have my certificate. It's 2024, so I fall into this report around here.
Yeah.
I still have my certificate. I was basically was left to feel like I got a big FU from some of the people that I had to deal with. And there are some that were really great, but then some that just made me feel like a piece of shit for having to leave. But you bring up the age thing. And so I had mentioned that for when it comes to the Reg Force members, there were 17 Reg Force and Reserve, all 21 of them, they were all male. But of the Reg Force, 8 of them were between the ages of 15 to 29. 7 of them were between the ages of 30 and 44, and 2 were between the ages of 45 and 59, making the median age 31. 6 of them were combat arms, 11 were not. 6 of them had a history of deployment, whether it was combat deployment or deployment otherwise. 11 did not. 11 of them were junior non-commissioned members. 4 of them were senior non-commissioned members, and 2 of them were officers. And they even broke down the method. The numbers are the same from the 2024 report, which would have been 2023, and increased from 2022. So just focusing on those 3 years. The other thing that might kind of be interesting to point out is when you look at the budget, and I don't want to pick on VAC, okay? Because there are a lot of phenomenal people who work within VAC who are amazing. I am not picking on any of them. I just need you to understand I am looking specifically just at the numbers. So that money can only be put towards claims. So if a member or a veteran puts in a claim, whether it's for hearing, for PTSD, for a knee injury, a back injury, for whatever it is, that number is only for that. Whatever doesn't get used, cannot be used anywhere else, it stays there. It stays there to be then used for the next year on top of whatever extra that they get to put towards that. 2024, okay, ironically, when we saw an increase of members who unfortunately died by suicide, that number basically tripled for what they had left over. So that tells me that people aren't reaching out for the help. They aren't putting in the claims. They're being encouraged to not, or worse of all, more claims are getting denied. And why are they getting denied? So it's like, I think that that's something that should be looked at, because if we have 24% of people who where a secondary stressor is financial problems and they're getting claims denied, like, I think that's something worth looking into. And I think that it's just odd to me that between those 2 years where we see an increase of suicide, and people might say like, oh, it's not that much, it's only 5. That's 5. That's 5 people. That's 5 people.
That's 5 too many.
Exactly. And then the fact that there's also like an increase of potential funds for claims left over. I'm not saying that that's related. I'm just saying it's interesting and it should be looked at. And the fact that, and on that part where we say like it's 5, I am so tired when it comes to looking at these stats and they say, oh, well, it didn't increase, but it stayed the same. No. That's still a problem. Or, oh, it's only been an increase of 1.3% per year since 1995. That is still a problem. Like, I understand the reality of it. I understand that we will never get that number to be 0, but it doesn't mean we need to accept and normalize the number that we have.
You know, I wonder if, like, you know how long a VAC application sits there. Like, I think their turnaround is what, 2 years on average, right? I'm just going to throw that out there. I think it's a 2-year turnaround. I think it could be longer now. I'm not sure. Has it gotten better? It may have gotten better on your. It may have gotten better for you guys. I don't think it's gotten any better for us. You know, us who I think they're trying to get rid of under the Veterans Affairs altogether anyways, but that might have something to do with it. I don't know what your turnaround rate is. So are they then going to turn around, and I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, well, our applications have increased so enormously that it's a backlog, and that money only gets put forward when the application gets approved. And because there's such a backlog of applications because they've increased, right? You know where I'm going with this? That's occurring.
Yeah.
Which, you know, so devil's advocate, right? That's why that money is still sitting there. But then, you know what? There's no excuse for the fact that the next year, you still have that money sitting there, given the fact that, that backlog should have been dealt with.
Yeah, it kind of leads it only further validates those who have the feeling of, I can't trust this establishment, I can't trust this person, because it shouldn't take that long. And you shouldn't have to so carefully and strategically wordsmith the claim just to hope that it gets accepted. Because I have seen people put in claims, valid claims, and they just get denied. And it's like, how can you deny that? How can you deny that? Like, that aside, because the topic for today is these stats and the report, and we can talk about that. Can take up tons of different episodes. I just brought that up just as an interesting fact. And I know next time we talk, I really want to go over the DOAD 5017-1. This is suicide prevention, intervention, postvention for 2025, based on this report of how they plan to make changes and hopefully improve this number for the 2026 report. But the fact is, the numbers
are staying the same and increasing.
Yeah, they are relatively staying the same and increasing. I mean, like, just as a fun fact, looking through these reports, the worst year for the elements when it came to Army was 2011. The worst year for Air Force was 2019, where they saw the highest number. Navy, 2006, 2011, 2014, they were all about tied. We're seeing in the other department, when it comes to military personnel command, Canadian Special Forces, we're seeing those numbers double. And the fact that, like, the one thing that did surprise me is that the majority for this report, the majority of those 17 were not combat arms. A lot of times you'll see it the opposite. I mean, in 2011, almost all of them were combat arms.
I saw on Instagram yesterday from some woman, and I don't even remember who she was, to be quite honest, just complaining and bitching about the fact that, some guy was, now all of a sudden it's June and it's their mental health month. And what do you mean you can't deal with life stressors? Do you have any idea how many stressors women have? And you don't hear us complaining. And I kind of sat back and I had to watch this video, and I had to turn it off, because I thought, I understand that you have stressors, but where is the empathy for anybody? I don't care whether you're male or female, but at some point you have to understand that they're holding it together. You expect this man to be a man, go to work hard, right? Deal with whatever is going on at work. Then he has to come home, and he's probably coming home to someone like you, where, you are sitting here, this girl, you are sitting here, and you expect him not to tell you what happened at work. You expect him on the way home from work. That girl, not you, but that girl who, is probably expecting him to stop off at the grocery store, pick up things, then come home, care for the children while she probably doesn't cook or do anything else, then take care of whatever, then deal with whatever, and then just silently go to bed. And meanwhile, this guy is holding up the world on his shoulders, and then just put it on repeat. Right. And he probably has to listen to her complain about whatever it is that she claims she has to deal with during that day as well. And I kind of sat back and I thought, wow, what happened to just everybody sitting back and the day of well, how was your day? And actually just listening to what happened during that day and being empathetic to anybody. Right. And I kind of just sat there listening to her, just doing the old, okay, because so you have a bone to pick with the fact that June is Male Mental Health Day month, right? I don't know what happened to people along the way, and we stopped kind of just looking at people as people and just looking at them and going, "Are you okay?" It's simple, right? Are you okay? Are you okay? What's going on? Is there anything I can help you with?
Just to throw it out there, when we talk about mental health is mental health across the board, absolutely. We also deal with it differently too, as women. More emotional, critical thinkers. Men are logical, task-oriented. The way I look at it is muscular. When we look at the muscular features, fat deposits, the bone structure, the skeleton of a man from a woman is completely different. The way that
Mhm.
they are able to build muscle is completely different from a way that a woman can build muscle, which is why, we need to protect our sports. We can see that. And so it's not a far-fetched thing to then also know that what's going on in our brain is going to be significantly different. The chemicals and the way that the brain functions in a male brain versus a female brain is going to be significantly different. And so when it comes to strategic prevention, intervention, postvention, I think in some way it does need to kind of be tailored to that,
Mhm.
because again, logical, task-oriented mindset is not going to approach something like cognitive behavioral therapy the same way that a female brain would. And maybe there's something to be said about that. Are we giving the same blanket therapy to everybody? Is there space for us to be able to tailor this a little bit better, which would then, I would hope, encourage more men to come forward because they might feel more comfortable with it, and they might really like they can find a way to blend attached to it better. I think there's something to be said about that.
And I think my understand, I would hope that they tailor it, right? I mean, let's face this. I mean, we speak two different languages. We all know that,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, when I just want to be listened to, don't, they want to fix it. Don't fix my problems. I just want to be heard sometimes, right? Like, I mean, we approach things completely and totally different. I'd imagine, well, I know that we probably think about things completely different as well, right? So therefore, we're going to fix things emotionally different. I mean, it's no different than trying to put something together with like a male, right? Like you go at it completely different structurally, trying to put something together. I would hope, and you know what? Maybe we need to bring on a psychologist for this. You know what? I would hope that when they're treating and speaking with a male versus a female, that they go about this in a completely different manner to kind of break through, what it is that's going on, so that they do feel comfortable, or that they're understanding it in a different way that we are. I mean, let's face it, you know what? Like, unless I've lost somebody, you'll rarely see a tear come out of me unless I am so frustrated that I just they're frustration tears, right? So, and most men don't understand that. They'll be like, oh my God, there's a tear, right? Okay, well, I'm so frustrated, I'm gonna punch somebody in a second. And that it's a frustration. It's not a, hey, I need to cry. Like there's no crying here. Like it is like so frustrated right now. But unless you know that about somebody, it's you can't fix something. I would imagine that it's dealt with, but then you got to look at the science of it as well, right? Like if you are dealing with like a PTSD related mental illness, is it all just science? Is it just a rewiring of a brain? And it just needs to be rewired, and there's no difference between a female rewiring and a male rewiring.
When it comes to the next time we talk, where we'll be going into the 2025 suicide prevention, intervention, postvention for through DOED 5017-1. Before we wrap up here, any predictions? We haven't looked at it yet. What would be something that you would hope to see in that report?
I don't know. Given what we've already seen, I don't know where that's going to take us. This could be a crapshoot, this one.
I would like to see them address the fact that it was all male, and I would like to see what they have in place or planned to help that. I would like to see if they have anything specific for therapy related or tailored to men. I think that would be interesting.
I don't know if anybody actually wants to touch on that.
I would like to see something addressing the ages. 15 of those 17 Rake Forest members were, I think, like under the age of 44. And when you think about when you joining with parental permission at 16 or on your own at like 18, we're looking at a young group. Or maybe if I was like 16, I wouldn't say that they're young. But like looking at it now, yeah, we're looking at a really young group of individuals, the majority of which were junior NCMs. What's going on there? I would like to see how they address those things. And I am excited to go through this with you next time as we dissect it piece by piece.
Absolutely. You know what? The one thing that I want to see is I want to actually see whether or not they blame the addiction on the taking of the life, or whether or not they attribute what's actually going on to the addiction, which leads to the taking of the life. Because you and I both know that that addiction doesn't occur by itself. There's a factor that leads to the addiction, which leads to the taking of the life. So, you know what? I'm curious to see whether or not they break that down and say what was actually going on that led to the addiction, that led to the taking of the life. Because at the end of the day, they're all employed by the same person. So what was going on that led to the addiction, that led to the taking of the life?
And just my final thought on this, because we touched on the whole my pet peeve of, you know, people normalizing or just accepting these percentages because they're so low. I would just like to point out that if this was a Starbucks that employed, let's say, 25 people on staff, and 17 of them
Oh,
unfortunately died by suicide, due to suicide, that would be all over the news. That would be everywhere. That would be in everybody's faces. But because of the number of members in the CAF, 21 total, that doesn't seem like a big number.
oh, gee, it never is. And I've said for years that there's an epidemic in first responders taking their lives, an epidemic, and that, you know what, that police forces need to step up. It is, the numbers have just, they've increased, and it's ridiculous. And you know what, and nobody says anything. It really is. It's just, it's like you plug your ear, and it's just like, oh, well, there's another one. You know, it's gotten to the point now where you can post all you like and just keep bringing it up, and it's just like, it's a shrug of a shoulder now. Like, it's like any other news story. It's royally sad. But if it was, you're right, if it was another organization or another employer, it would never be overlooked. It would never be overlooked. But you know what, here's what I think we need to leave on. If anybody needs assistance, we'll put up the numbers. Okay, reach out, talk to somebody, do a buddy check, call a hotline.
Boots on the Ground Alberta, I'm going to give a shout out to them, initiated, led by Mo, available 24 hours, peer, you're just talking to a peer, you know, you're just
988 is up. 988 is up, you guys. If anybody needs just someone last minute, 988, call 988. They are up and running everywhere in every province.
Amazing.
Right?
Amazing.
So,
right. Well,
absolutely.
I am so excited. I look forward to diving into this report with you. I look forward to the guests that we're going to have come on as we explore this topic more, not just through men's mental health, but mental health in general through both the RCMP and the CAF, and just pushing that conversation forward and being that squeaky wheel. So thank you, everybody who has listened with us today and sat along with us, and we appreciate every single one of you. And until next time, keep it PG.